back to another episode of Not D&D, which is of course brought to you by EN World Live, which is part of EN World, the tabletop news and review site. I'm your host Jessica, and I'm very excited because this week, let's try that again. I'm very excited. I can't get my words out because this week we have the guest Michael Sands here with us. Michael, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you for inviting me.
Of course, we're here to have you talk about Monster of the Week. So this is such a cult classic game, in my opinion, in my gaming group. We absolutely love it, so I'm really excited to share it with everybody here watching. If you're watching live right now, if you have any questions, if you type it in the chat, we'll answer it for you. So just jump in and feel free to get involved. We're just two nerds having a chat about tabletop RPGs, and if you're a nerd that likes them too, you can join in. So Michael, I always start by asking questions about the guest and your background with tabletop RPGs. So what was the first tabletop RPG you ever played?
It was basic Dungeons and Dragons.
Classic.
My neighbours got a copy of the box set when it first came out in New Zealand, which was about 1979, 1980. And so,
oh, wow.
they got me into it.
Amazing. So when were you, who were you just like playing with your friends at home and stuff? And then,
yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. And a group of us at school got really into it. So it's kind of grew from there. And I've never stopped playing. So
yeah, I was about to say you got really into it because now this is your whole kind of, career and things. So what was that journey like when, so obviously a lot of people play Dungeons and Dragons when they're very young, but they don't have, they're not like a tabletop RPG writer like you are. So what was that journey like? How did you get there?
Well, at first, I think it's because I was always interested in different games. So I didn't just play D&D. Like quite early on, I played Traveller, which is one of the first of the science fiction games, and tried out a few of the other ones, things like Tunnels and Trolls and Mercenary Spies and Private Eyes, which is kind of an early pulp game.
That sounds very cool. I've not heard of that one.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure it would hold up very well today, but it was quite fun.
Oh, no. Okay. At the time, it was good. When the bar was low, because there weren't many games out there. Okay, great. Got it.
Yeah. So playing lots of games. And then in the 1990s, I got into going to our annual local convention here, which had quite a strong culture of people like doing homebrew games and their own rule systems and things like that. And I think like doing that plus all my own experience doing this things for my own game group kind of built up to where I started designing. And then that's even more encouraged when, as internet communities grew up and like around 2000 and the 2000s, getting involved in groups there talking about role-playing game design, places like the Forge and Story Games, and later on the Google Plus communities about that. So all kind of worked in. So it's definitely been a long journey of like playing games to learn what's out there and like honing my abilities to actually design them myself.
Well, it seems like it's a long journey that's kind of paid off, like you said. So this week we're here to talk about your game Monster of the Week. So give us a quick whistle-stop tour of that. So how would you describe Monsters of the Week to people that have never heard about it before?
It's the modern monster hunting action game inspired by Supernatural, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Fringe, The X-Files, and things like that. So if you want to be modern people hunting supernatural monsters, that's what it's about.
Fantastic. And so I'm guessing you're going to say the inspiration source is you're fans of that kind of genre of film and TV, and that's where the idea kind of came from.
So it was specifically Supernatural when I first started watching that, which was I was a little late finding it, but when I did, and I thought, I really want to play a role-playing game like this, but I can't see any out that do that job, that quite had that feel.
So you're like, I'm going to make it. If it doesn't exist, if I want it, other people probably want it, and it will exist. So when did you start working on Monster of the Week, and what was that design process like?
See, in terms of start, I don't know which year it was, but it would have been about the third year of Supernatural's run, because I had a friend who lent me some of the DVDs of the first series or two. So, and that was when I started watching it. And I think I pretty much immediately started working on the game then, which was quite a bit before Apocalypse World was released. So it was a very different game then. It was a wholly different system, which I basically worked on. I ran playtests, took it to conventions and ran games there for people, and slowly evolved it over a few years. Then when Vincent Baker released Apocalypse World, and I played that, which was right when it first came out, I was struck by how what he had done in that game was like solving a bunch of the problems I had with the design of Monster of the Week that I was working on. So I kind of quickly turned it into a kind of hybrid of the ideas I'd had and the ideas from Apocalypse World, which I think really captured that like strongly genre-centered style of play, where you're where it's all about kind of capturing a certain feel.
Definitely. And with the with Apocalypse World, for people that kind of aren't familiar with Apocalypse World, maybe they haven't played it yet, what were the things about it that you thought would fit very well with the setting that you're creating?
I think probably the first thing is the way the classes were presented, because he had that playbook style thing where which Monster of the Week has too, where you've got a strong central concept for a character. Like in Monster of the Week, one of them's the chosen one, like Buffy, something like that, where it's very, very specific. In Apocalypse World, there's things like there's a gang leader is one of the things who actually has a motorcycle gang. And that game's kind of Mad Max style post-apocalypse. So that's the vibe that's happening there. So yeah, those playbooks as classes, which had a lot going on and packed with really cool abilities. Like there are very few abilities that are like, get +1 on a roll, and lots of abilities that like allow you to affect the world in much more interesting ways. So I think that's the second part. And I think the last one is the attitude to playing and running the game, where it completely throws away the idea that there's a story that the game master's written that you're going to work through. Instead, it says you're in a situation, there are some things happening, there might be some bad people or some people who are going to cause trouble, and you can just do what you want and we'll see what happens, which I think he called it playing to find out. And that's always kind of been the style I like. So having it explained in such a kind of neat way really made an impact on me.
Yeah, I love how you've just articulated that, because I think that's exactly the style of play it is. Completely, you're presented with a scenario and given kind of ultimate narrative freedom to play around, which is so fun. Talking about some of the playbooks as well that you mentioned, so what ones will we find in Monster of the Week? So you mentioned you can be the chosen one,
There's
like a Buffy the Vampire Slayer one.
There's the wronged, who's the person who's kind of lost everything and on a vengeful journey against the monsters that did it. There's the professional, who's like your Mulder or Scully type,
amazing
law enforcement agent kind of who hunts monsters. Another favorite is the mundane, who's just like the normal person in the Monster Hunter group. Like Xander and Buffy. The person who doesn't really have any monster hunting skills as such.
There for the vibes.
We've got quite a lot over the years, so I don't think I can go through all of them, but I've tried to kind of encompass a big range, but also ones that each have their own little story to tell. So, or I should say, actually, maybe a group of stories to tell. So you're not kind of locked into the same story if you play the same character type again, or as someone else would if they were playing. If that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. So with, like you say, mechanics are kind of based on, very inspired by Apocalypse World. So you've got kind of the playbooks coming in there. So what else mechanically does the game look like? So if we're sitting down to play for the first time, what sort of things do I need with me, and how do we play?
Yeah. Well, unlike Dungeons and Dragons, it doesn't really have skills. You do have some stats that are like your basic, what your character's good at, although they're a bit more abstracted. They're things like how tough you are, how weird you are, and rather than how strong or agile. And rather than skills, the mechanics operate using moves, which is an idea Baker came up with in Apocalypse World, where it's still a resolution mechanism, but rather than saying like you're doing a particular thing, it's like answering a fictional situation. So like rather than how good are you with hitting with a sword, in Monster of the Week there's a move called kick some ass, and that's more like, if you're in a fight, how good are you going to do? The rolls are pretty simple. They're just 2d6 and add the appropriate rating that goes with them. So for the kick some ass, that's tough usually. And it's divided into 3 levels of success. If you roll low, you get a miss and something very bad happens. If you roll in the middle, you get like a weak hit or a partial hit, where you get what you want, you achieve what you're trying to do, but there's maybe a cost or a complication associated with it. And if you roll really high, then everything goes great.
Perfect. And it's exactly how you want, and you get a cool cinematic moment, is it?
Yeah, pretty much. And that's the core moves that require dice rolls. There's also a lot of moves in amongst the playbooks where they'll just give you an ability. The Flake, who's kind of a conspiracy theorist character, like they get a move where they can just they know if someone's lying to them. That's just what the move says. So they can always tell if they're being deceived.
Yeah.
So there's a few moves like that just give you a special ability or permission that's always on.
Amazing. I like the conspiracy theorist one because I kind of feel like, well, they're not really a conspiracy theorist in Monster of the Week because they're actually right. They're not wrong. This whole monster world is correct.
They could be. I've certainly seen people play Flakes who, even though monsters were real, they had some pretty way out ideas that were not.
Oh, okay. So they're like, so it validated them in a really bad way because they're like, I was right about this.
Yeah.
Everything else must be true as well. And it's like,
exactly.
No, just the monsters thing as well. So talking about Monster of the Week, it's a very versatile system. Like you can say, it's inspired by a range of, that sort of setting, and you can have lots of different monsters. What are the sort of stories people tell and the kind of monsters that people are playing against in campaigns?
Well, the story's a bit more constrained. I was talking before about the play to find out idea from Apocalypse World, but in Monster of the Week, because we're trying to match that episodic TV show style where they come in and within 40 minutes of drama they've figured out what was going on and stopped whatever monster was causing trouble. So it's got a kind of an arc to it where at the beginning the hunters come in, they don't really know what's going on, and the keeper, the game master in this game, will have made a countdown, which is like all the things that will happen if the hunters don't get to it in time and stop it. So rather than like having a set of encounters that you're going to have, you have this countdown telling you what's going to happen unless they deal with it. And that kind of drives the drama of it, because if the hunters mess around, those things are going to happen. However, what they do about it is entirely up to them. The other key thing that the game has is the idea that each monster has a particular weakness, and if you don't know what the weakness is and don't use it, you can't kill or stop the monster. So like you see in a lot of those shows, a lot of the investigations, not just working out what you're fighting, but working out what you need to do to stop this particular one.
like a vampire, it's just a stake through the heart and nothing else. If it's a zombie, destroy the brain. You've got to figure out the thing to make it work. Okay.
Yeah. But sometimes you might find out that this is a different variety of vampire or something like that too, right? Maybe this one stake to the heart isn't what's needed. Maybe it's something special.
Twist.
Yeah. In terms of what monsters that you asked about, what sort of monsters, I think generally, like those sorts of shows, we're generally drawing on folklore and urban legends is the pattern. That's what the game expects, and I think that's what most people do.
It's also easier than I think for you as a player, because you know the references and the clues that you're being given down then, you know, so it's everyone knows those kind of tropes, so it feels quite safe and comfortable as well. For me, this is a game because, like you say, it's so episodic and it's like so many TV shows. It feels like a game that's quite safe for kind of new players to play. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think so.
You know, how would you like recommend introducing somebody that's like never played any role-playing games? So if you're really into your role-playing games and you're looking for your friends to kind of join in, you're like, okay, let's get Monster of the Week. What tips do you have for welcoming someone to the hobby with this game?
Okay, I think the person who's going to be the keeper for the mystery should, these days, I'd recommend they grab a mystery that they like the idea of to run. Because these days there's quite a few out there. There's a lot of third-party ones that you can get on Drive-Thru-RPG and itch.io. Also, we've got a supplement called The Tome of Mysteries, which has got a lot of mysteries that were written by people all over the world. And there's quite a few in there that are nice introductory ones. So my advice for someone getting into it, like find a mystery either in the Tome of Mysteries or somewhere else online that seems really cool, and I think that's the important thing, that you're excited by it. Then read through the Monster of the Week's got a big chapter on running your first mystery with all this, like takes you through very carefully all the things you should do and think about as you're doing that. So read that through and go for it. And I think the way the system is built, you can't go too far wrong.
Okay, good to know. Good to know. So just have at and have fun, really, and just lean into the tropes and the story, and the rest will kind of come together. That's awesome to hear.
And I think that's that is another one of the things about Apocalypse World that I like. The way moves work and the way the keeper and Monster of the Week or Game Master generally reacts to them kind of keep the story flowing quite nicely without anyone having to work too hard.
I love
there's kind of a natural flow of what happens.
Yeah, I love the countdown, like you say, that the bad guy's doing something, and if you run off and do something else, the thing's going to happen. Because I think that's so useful to have in any game, really, because that's what makes a villain real. Like, because they're not going to sit in a room and wait until you just open the door before they're doing their thing. They're off doing their thing, whatever that may be. So I think that's really great for making a story feel real and that the stakes are high, and you kind of have to do something with that. So
I think so.
I put on the screen that you can pick up a copy of this at Evil Hat, and the link's in the chat if you're watching live, and in the show notes if you're listening to the podcast, as you can check that out there. So did you have so Evil Hat kind of published the game, so did you have a relationship with them beforehand before they published this, or was this the kind of first thing you made with them?
It was a another internet connection, actually. Fred Hicks, who's one of the founders of Evil Hat Productions, played a copy of the original version of Monster of the Week, which I crowdfunded in 2011, and which had a very small print-on-demand run. But he had come across it and played a game, and he got in touch with me to propose teaming up to kind of get it into wider distribution. Which ended up leading to the revised edition, which had a bit more material and quite a few changes based on the few years that had been out and the kind of questions I'd come across and things that needed to be a bit streamlined and so on.
Okay, great. So it's a great opportunity to kind of tweak it and
It was,
yeah, fantastic.
Especially coming at that just a few years point. That's long enough for me to have kind of heard quite a lot of different opinions about the game and kind of picked what things were good to fix.
Yeah, definitely. And speaking of kind of changing and adding things, there's a new something you're working on for Monster of the Week, which I'll pop up on the screen if you'd like to share with us, which I've only just learned about myself, so I'm very excited. So the Codex of Worlds. What is this about, Michael?
Yeah, so this is going to be a new supplement coming out in partnership with Evil Hat again. It's about half and half my work and Marek Golonka's. Marek is he's one of the people who contributed quite a lot to the Tome of Mysteries, and he had this proposition for a book of like alternate settings for Monster of the Week, which is what turned into the Codex of Worlds. So what's going to be in here is we've got a few little optional extra rules and new advice. We've got a whole bunch of completely different settings for Monster of the Week where we take it and put it in a historical or fantasy kind of setting that's takes it to a whole different place. The cover shows a bit of my Stone Age version of it, where your Stone Age monster hunters protecting your community. One of the ones that Marek's got is called the Monster Marches, which is kind of a bit more of a Witcher inspired setting. It's also very cool. And there's some others in there too. And we've also brought in the idea of team playbooks. So these are inspired by Blades in the Dark, and what they are like a character sheet for your whole Monster Hunter team with some special stuff that you can use to work together, some moves that the team can use, and some story seeds and things like that, which I think people will find pretty fun too.
Amazing. And you mentioned some kind of tweaks or optional extra rules and things. Can you share any of those with us, or are they still in development?
I can. No, they're not. They're basically some rules that came up that some of the settings used that we thought could be kind of generalized. So one of them is for my Stone Age setting. It changed around the way weaknesses work for mysteries so that it's more of a case of solving whatever problem made the mystery appear in the first place, rather than like finding the secret ingredient to kill a monster. So I called that Atonement Mysteries, and that's basically a different way of conceptualizing it. So rather than finding the weakness and killing the monster, you figure out what made it happen and fix that, or make recompense for that. And there's also one for a non-lethal play, which is kind of if you're going for more of a Scooby-Doo style game. It's more silliness than horror.
And I think sometimes players are not in the mood for a serious horror game, and sometimes it does just get silly. So I think that's great to have that option, because sometimes you can't fight that. If the table's feeling silly, you could there's nothing you can do. You have to go lean into it. So that's great to hear that you can do that. Talking a little bit more generally about running kind of horror games, do you have any advice for GMs on running, I'd say mainly Monster of the Week, but almost any kind of horror game, and how you create that atmosphere and environment and run a horror game?
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm quite the best person to ask, because I don't think I want like games that are horror first. I think I prefer games that are something else with like a vein of horror running through them. So like for Monster of the Week, I feel like it's primarily an action and drama game, which happens to be about fighting horrible monsters. So they're kind of more in Monster of the Week, when I'm running it anyway, the monsters are more to kind of cast a shadow that the hunters can work against. So yeah, in terms of atmosphere, so for that, I like to have the monsters kind of threaten things the hunters value more than attack them directly.
Yes.
And again, that's because it's kind of a drama focused thing for me. I want to kind of see what the characters are interested in.
Yeah, I love that. I love that idea. And that, like you say, sets the kind of the tone for the game, that it's drama and action opposed to like, we're going to sit in a room and cry for 3 hours style game, which I'm sure there are games of that style if that's what you want to do. But that's not what this is. Yeah. But yeah. And so do you have any kind of examples of that? Like you say, threatening the things the players care about. I don't know if you have any playtesting examples without obviously giving too many spoilers away on any upcoming things. Yeah.
Not that recently, actually. It's been a little while since I've finished the playtesting for any of the Monster of the Week stuff. But I tend to like to focus on either relationships that are already established for the characters and have monsters threaten those, or if they're even just the characters they like in the current mystery, it's just someone they met a few minutes ago, but sometimes the players or the character or some in between thing will just particularly take a liking to a certain non-player character. So that those also are a good place for drama to come to. I think if you can threaten those things the characters care about, that adds a lot of punch to your story.
Yeah, I like that advice. That's really sound advice there. And I love what you said about running this game as a GM. And this is coming from my perspective, because I've been a player for about over a decade, but haven't really GM'd. So I'm looking for games that I can kind of come in and run. And this feels like one of those games that, like you said before, is quite friendly. You know what the monster's doing. They're off doing their thing. You've got the story arc. You just present the players with the situation and they kind of run off and play it. So we kind of talked about welcoming new players to the table. So I'm going to jump back, and secretly this is just me asking for advice. What recommendations would you give to new GMs that are running the game and picking Monster of the Week to play?
Well, again, there's a lot of advice I put in there about how to come to it. Essentially, the role of the keeper, that's the game master in Monster of the Week, is about like listening to what they do and reacting to it. Unlike a lot of games, like you're not going to be bogged down with a lot of abilities and statistics and things for all your creatures. Those are all pretty streamlined. And a lot of the time you're going to be just thinking, okay, what's the most natural thing that can happen? And there's a bunch of lists in there of like what are appropriate things to happen in response to different situations to help give you ideas. But really it's that assessing what the fictional situation you're dealing with was, and what is the most natural thing that happens after what the hunters just did, whether it was a success or a failure or just an action that they did that didn't even require a roll of any kind. Again, so focus on thinking about the conversation around the table as being the primary thing. So you're always waiting for the players to tell you what their hunter does. You say, okay, then this happens. What do you do now? And just keep that rolling on. And to help with that, one of the things about the game is that like your prep for setting up a mystery is you can do it very lightweight. It's I tend to, for me, it takes about 10 minutes. I mean, I'm obviously probably one of the people who's got the most experience with it.
Yeah.
But all you really need is a concept for your monster, which if you're picking something from folklore or an urban legend, that could be quite quick. You need some ideas for its abilities and statistics, which there are not very many of, so you can get those down quickly. A weakness for it and a countdown, and what's it plotting and trying to do, and maybe a few locations and people to meet along the way. So if you want to strip it down to the minimum, you can do it quite quickly. And if you want to kind of fill out more details, if you're not so confident improvising as you go, that's also an option. You can kind of fill out more of the stuff they might come across as well. In terms of the introduction, I spent a lot of time writing the advice of how to do your first game and how to cope with that conversation around the table. And I think if you go through that and take that in, and you'll have a pretty solid game.
That's excellent advice. Thank you very much. Like I say, that was just me fishing for advice on how to run Monster of the Week for the first time secretly. Yeah. So that's mostly why I do this show. It's just so I can interview people and ask some questions for myself about it.
Yeah.
So speaking of, talking about Monster of the Week, are there any kind of questions I should have asked you about the game, or things about it you'd like to kind of highlight and talk about whilst we got the time here?
No, I think we've covered the main things about it.
Excellent, good. Means I did ask all the right questions. Phew, good to know. So if you enjoy the chat and you want to pick up a copy of Monster of the Week, you can go to Evil Hat. The link is in the chat there and on the screen, because the best way to support indie tabletop RPG creators is to buy their stuff. Michael, if people want to stay in touch with you, or if they jumped in a bit late and they didn't get the chance to ask you a question, where's good to find you on the internet?
I'm on Twitter at the moment, so as long as that survives, I'll still be there. You can get me at Generic Games NZ or Monster of the Week _RPG there. Or my website, genericgames.co.nz, there, where I'll post any news that's relevant, and you can find my other social connect links and things there.
Wherever we might go when Twitter flies off.
Yeah.
Fantastic. That's great to have that in there. Well, great to have that in there. The other question I have as well is, do you have any recommendations for tabletop RPGs? And the rules are they cannot be ones that you have made, and they can't be Dungeons and Dragons.
Okay, yeah, I do. I've got a selection of 3 here that have been dominating my mind at the moment.
Oh.
So the first one here is Starforged, which just came in the mail a week and a bit ago, which is another Powered by the Apocalypse game by Sean Tomkin. What makes it interesting is that it's built from the beginning for like solo or cooperative play without a game master. And you can also play it with a game master, but you don't have to.
Yeah.
And I've played a little bit of the game, the first game he wrote, which is called Ironsworn, which is like a fantasy version of the same thing, and had a great time. And Starforged is like the science fiction space opera streamlined version of it. And it looks really, really cool. So I'm very much looking forward to getting that to the table.
Yeah, I've seen that picked up some awards or something, didn't it? I think I remember seeing that talked about, or not, certainly nominated for some things. So I've heard about that one.
The Kickstarter for it got a lot of attention, so I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
Another one, and this is a bit of more of a obscure one. This is Katanas and Trenchcoats.
Okay.
Which is like the role-playing game of all the over-the-top gothy action movies of the 80s and 90s. So it's like Highlander, Blade, all of that, and a fair bit of nostalgia for those of us who played Vampire and Werewolf in the 1990s too. That's by Ryan Macklin, and was the result of a very, very long delayed Kickstarter. I think it ended up taking about 5 years to come through, but the final result's just absolutely wonderful. It's both hilarious to read, and I think feels like it's packed with really solid advice. So another one I'm really looking forward to getting to the table, but haven't quite got to yet. And the last one I'm looking at the moment is Alien, which I really love this. I've played it a couple of times, and I'm currently preparing to run one of their cinematic scenarios in a couple of weeks for some friends of mine. So I'm kind of deep in reading up on the rules of that at the moment, and very much looking forward to getting that out. That's another one where I think they've got a nice take on horror, because the way the stress builds up for your characters in Alien builds so much tension. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, if you're interested in learning more about the Alien RPG, we did interview them and talked about, we interviewed Free League and talked about the stress mechanic. So if you go back on the podcast or the stream and just look up Alien, you can see an interview about that as well, so you can get more in depth. But yes, I'm excited to get my copy to the table as well, because it's just sitting on that shelf right now, not doing anything very exciting. Well, I think that brings us up to the end of our time. So Michael, thank you so much for coming on and joining us and sharing Monster of the Week with us. And very excited to see the Codex of Worlds coming out next year as well. So keep in touch and let us know when that's coming out.
yeah, at the moment, all I can say is that production's going on, and we're
Mhm.
hoping it will be like early to mid next year, but it all depends on a lot of production scheduling. So
Of course.
can't be
So
sure yet.
that's fine. We'll keep in touch. Let us know when it's coming out, and we can update the
I
show
will.
notes to let
Yep.
people know. That's great. All right. Thank
Cool.
you so much, and thank you to everyone watching and listening. Goodbye.